We are getting ready for our Let ABC15 Know Ask an Attorney live phone bank happening tonight. And so I'm Christelle Bell with the Let ABC15 Know team. Also joining me today is Mr. Adam Weingart. He's a volunteer attorney that's going to be with us answering phones tonight. So this is our Let ABC15 Know Ask an Attorney phone bank. We were talking about family law tonight. And so we're glad that you're able to be with us to provide the assistance. We're always grateful when we get to have these phone banks because we get so many calls, we get so many people that need help. And so thank you already for being with us tonight.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so we're talking about family law. That's the topic. It seems to always be a very popular topic when we have these phone banks. And there's a lot of areas to cover. I think one of the biggest questions I wanted to ask you, and tell us a little bit about your firm and family law while you're at that, but what are you seeing when you look at different cases involving family law?
So the wonderful thing about family is that it's sort of this insanely huge umbrella that it encompasses all these different types of law. And that's why I love doing what I do, is because, you get to sort of dip your feet into contract law, obviously working protections, there's child custody, there is divorce, there's annulments, there's legal separations, there's just, child support hearings. So it's quite a lot. My firm does family law on one side. On the other side, we do criminal defense. So it's kind of a 1-2 punch.
Wow. And so, one of the biggest things, we were kind of talking a little bit about this before we were on the stream. You say a lot of the cases that you deal with surround domestic violence, and it's not talked about as much as it should be. And it's heavily involved in a lot of these cases that you deal with.
It is. And so, obviously there is a little bit of, I suppose, bias, because obviously I see marriages when they're at their end, or relationships involving children when they're at their end. And but I think something that a lot of people don't realize, and I certainly didn't realize it until I started doing this type of law, was how much domestic violence actually does play a huge role in it, and how much a lot of people don't want to talk about it. More than that, I think a lot of people actually don't realize just what domestic violence is and what it isn't. So in Arizona, we have an incredibly robust domestic violence statute that it incorporates everything from disorderly conduct, if it's between two people with an intimate relationship or who have children, all the way up to heinous crimes against children. So it's incredibly broad. However, what's interesting about that is what's not in the domestic violence statute.
Yeah.
Manipulation isn't, financial control isn't, and what I like to call coercive control, or when people get into these relationships where they're being horribly gaslit. You ask anyone on the street, that's domestic violence. You know what I mean? But it's not recognized in Arizona as domestic violence.
Is it harder to prove these type of cases when you have situations like that?
Absolutely. So compare and contrast it. If you have pictures of somebody who's been, you have bruises on children, on spouses, whatever. Obviously, there's, it makes it easier to sort of prove a case of domestic violence, rather than if somebody has been, controlled throughout the entirety of their relationship. Their scars are more mental than they are physical.
Yeah. When you start talking about gathering evidence and talking about these type of particular cases in family law, what are some of the first steps that people need to take when there's a family situation? We're talking about divorce or maybe child custody. They want to talk to a lawyer about what their rights are. What should they have in place when they start that initial conversation?
So, depending on the attorney's office, you'll either have paid consults or free consults. Either way, you're going to want to make the absolute most out of the conversation that you're having with the attorney. So sit down ahead of time. Take like an hour. Write down a timeline. Write down anything you think is relevant. Write down, if it's a divorce, make sure you have a handle on your finances and you're able to tell the attorney, well, this is where the money goes when it comes out of a paycheck. And just make sure that everything is good and consolidated, so that, again, you can make the most of with the time that you have with the attorney.
Yeah, I think that's so important that you mentioned that, which is again why we do these phone banks. And so when people can call tonight, they'll call. The phone lines will open at 5 o'clock. Have your documents ready, have your questions ready, so that you are able to go ahead and get right in, speak with someone, and get the initial, just somewhere to start. Because I think that's the biggest thing. A lot of times people just don't know where to start, and this is a good start.
That's a great start. And
Yeah.
these phone banks are wonderful because it provides everyone sort of an open invitation to come in and ask a question. Reaching out to an attorney, calling an attorney, making an appointment with their office, it's kind of scary, especially because, mentally you have to be in that headspace. If I'm about to take that jump, I'm about to start this off, and I'm about to get information that's going to lead to some very big changes in my life. With the phone bank, it's sort of an open invitation. It's like, just call in. What can hurt?
Yeah, I never really thought about that. That's such a valid point because you have to be in that mental space too. Like you said, make that jump, and sometimes it's difficult. This is something emotional because people's families are going to change. The dynamic of what happens in their household changes. And so it's a lot.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of times people don't leave, or what I found, a lot of people don't leave relationships. It's not because for any other reason than they're terrified of their day-to-day dramatically changing. And they sort of rationalize it with, okay, this kind of sucks, but if I just hold on and don't, I can live with this because I don't know what the change is going to be like. I know what this is like, though,
It's the fear of uncertainty, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so I want to let you know the phone lines are going to open tonight again. We are always grateful that we partnered with the State Bar of Arizona to bring this phone bank. It's ABC15, the Let ABC15 Know team, the State Bar of Arizona. We have our legal experts. Adam will be on the other line answering calls tonight. And as you can hear, he is very well known in the area of family law, but he'll be answering calls tonight. I want to go ahead and give you that number. The phone lines will not open until 5 o'clock. So if you call, it is 855-522-1515. Don't try to call now. You have to wait until 5 o'clock. But again, we're grateful that you are going to be able to join us and a rest of the team of volunteers that are going to be with us tonight. There are other topics when you talk about that big umbrella of family law. We're talking about, divorce. We're talking about child custody. Child support is also involved in that. Do you have anything of what people should know and be prepared for with that?
Absolutely. So child support's really it's really cool, but it's a little bit controversial. And the reason being is because the philosophy behind it is wonderful because it takes into account that both parents have an obligation to provide for a child. Mm-hmm. Sort of where things get dicey is the different factors that go into child support is who's spending more time with the child, and that's first and foremost. And I'm sure you can probably figure out why that might motivate people to sort of get or try to get custody, even though they might not necessarily want it. Because even if they have custody on paper, that theoretically would influence then the child support calculator. The next thing that goes into it is how much each party's making, who's paying for daycare, and then who's paying for like emergency service or anything like healthcare, stuff like that, or schooling. Mm-hmm. So these different sort of costs all sort of get factored into the child support algorithm. And like I said, it's a wonderful idea, but in practice, sometimes, you sort of see people who really do, they try to get custody more.
A little skewed.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. There's going to be you can call about a range of topics tonight. We're talking about adoption. Guardianship is also some of the topics that we get calls about. Divorce, separation, those are topics as well. Juvenile law is also a big one that we normally get phone calls about when we have this phone bank. So no question is off limits when it comes to family law, because maybe you just need a little help with, how do I do XYZ, or how do I file this type of form? And you may need a little help with that. So this is the time that you can call to get free legal advice. So have your questions ready. If you have documents you might need to go through, have that right in front of you. Be patient. That is one thing that I will say to you tonight. Be patient. If you can't get through, keep trying. Keep trying, because we want to help as many people as we can. I'll give you that number again before we sign off: 855-522-1515. It is the Let ABC15 Know Ask an Attorney phone bank that is happening, handling family law tonight. So Adam, again, is going to be there answering your calls tonight. Thank you so much for being part of this. This is tremendous help to so many people.
Thanks for having us.
All right.
Thanks for putting this thing on.
Absolutely. All right. 855-522-1515, 5 o'clock until 7 o'clock tonight.